Hey everyone, I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to Latin America Diaries, and welcome to Pasto, the capital of the department of Nariño in the far-flung southwest of Colombia. This is a mountainous region of Colombia where the culture seamlessly blends into that of Ecuador. If you're interested in learning more about this part of the world, and Ecuador in particular, I have a vlog coming up on Ecuador in fact, so make sure that you like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to make sure that you do not miss a minute of my travels around Latin America. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, then please share my content and tell your family and friends about it. It would really mean a lot to me. So, Pasto. Getting there was a journey. I was flying with Avianca from Santa Marta to Bogota and then a connecting flight from Bogota to Pasto. However, due to inclement weather across the north of Colombia just after New Year, a lot of flights were delayed and several were cancelled. When I arrived at Santa Marta airport that morning, it was pure chaos. Flights were being changed around, schedules were getting scrambled, people were just running in all sorts of directions. When I arrived there, I was told that my flight to Bogota was delayed by 2 hours, which meant that I would have missed my connecting flight to Pasto. I told them, the staff at the airport, about my situation, and they told me that I could be bumped onto another flight. So that actually, even though it was originally scheduled for later, it ended up taking off from Santa Marta before my original flight had even arrived, before the aircraft had even arrived to, take me to Bogota. So I thought, at that point, that I had won the lottery. But then I got to Bogota, and as we were coming into land at Bogota airport, we were on approach to the runway, and suddenly the plane powered up again, and we were going back up into the sky. And the flight attendant came on the PA system and told us that the pilot had to abort the landing due to traffic that hadn't cleared the runway. And so we had to go around. It was the first time that I'd ever experienced something like that, and honestly, it was actually a bit of an anticlimax in a way. Definitely, as we were coming down to land and then when the plane powered up again, you felt the force of it. But apart from people sort of looking around the cabin, what's going on, it was actually really calm and quiet inside the plane. And anyway, chalk that one up to the history books, a history book of experiences in my life. Anyway, as the plane finally came around for its second approach, I realized that I was going to miss my connection through Bogota. So I was stuck in Bogota for the night. However, Avianca were kind enough to put me up in a hotel, and I got back to the airport at 6 o'clock the next morning for a very early flight out to Pasto, where I touched down at this spectacular airport in the middle of the mountains, with clouds hanging low and mist rolling through the valley. And just like that, from the warmth of the Caribbean, I was right back in the cold, crisp Colombian highlands once again. I was really in Pasto to experience the Carnaval de Negros y Blancos, or the Carnival of Blacks and Whites, which is one of Colombia's most iconic Andean festivals. However, that was occurring the next day. So on the first day, I went with a friend, Santiago, who had also traveled down from Bogota, out to a high-altitude lake called Laguna de la Cocha. We boarded a minibus from Pasto and climbed high up into the mountain and the drizzle until eventually we arrived at the bus station at Laguna de la Cocha. From there, we walked out along a wooden boardwalk into the drizzle, straight toward the edge of the lake. The whole place hit me immediately. It felt like a frontier. Not surreal, but real. Raw wilderness. It reminded me a little of the Shiosar Lake in the Deosai Plains of Pakistan, although it's not nearly as high or as dramatic, but it still had that feeling of a silent, wild landscape at the end of the world. Unlike Diosay though, Laguna de la Cocha is not isolated. There's development along the shore, colourful boats taking people out on tours, little cafes serving hot chocolate, coffee, and because we were there on the eve of the Carnival, we started seeing the first hints of the celebrations getting into full swing. So people spraying water at each other, throwing flour, talcum powder and the like. We even got hit once by it, but that was nothing compared to what awaited us in Pasto later on. As evening fell, we made our way back to the bus stop at Laguna de la Cocha, and there was a huge line of people waiting to get back into the center of Pasto for the evening. And I remember the buses were filling up as they were waiting to leave from Laguna de la Cocha, and occasionally there would be, say, one free seat in a bus. So the attendants at the bus stop would yell out to the front of the line, we need one person. And then the people further back along the line, like a ripple, they would be screaming out, one. And then finally, one person at the back of the line, maybe if there was a person who was traveling alone, they would come bounding up, and then everyone would start cheering them as they made it onto the bus. They would take up the last seat on the bus would pull out, and then the next empty bus would come in. So it was pretty funny. This is one of the things that I love the most about Latin America, and particularly Colombia. People seem to have this ability to turn any situation into a situation. And it was chaotic, but it was hilarious. The next morning, Santiago and I woke up at the Hotel Yuri, which was just okay, and made our way by foot to the center of Pasto for the Carnaval de Negros y Blancos. The Carnaval de Negros y Blancos is a festival unique to the southwest of Colombia. It celebrates the cultural vibrancy and the cultural mix of the region, a blending of indigenous culture, colonial Spanish influence, and also elements of the Afro-Caribbean influence in this part of the world. The festival celebrates the emancipation of the people of color of this part of Colombia, and over time it has evolved to become a beautiful expression and festival celebrating inclusion. Santiago got in touch with some friends of his who live in the region, and they told him that they would be hosting a barbecue on a rooftop overlooking the central square of Pasto. So we would have a perfect view of the goings-on in the middle of the city. Now, if you know what's about to come, you will know that this was a very smart move, because this festival, while incredibly colorful and vibrant, it also gets very messy and chaotic very quickly. Throughout the day, we had the perfect vantage point to watch the colors of the floats, the waves of foam and powder roll through the square, but we also had the space to really sit back and take in the spectacle and breathe and enjoy. We also enjoyed great food. The hosts there were so kind, and we stayed much longer than we probably would have lasted had we been stationed down on the ground in the middle of the melee. By the time the colourful floats began marching through the square, which was already the middle of the day, the square below us was already a mess of foam and talcum powder. There are a few different stories floating around about how this tradition began. One version says that during the earliest editions of the Carnaval de Negros y Blancos, people sprayed powdered perfume through the streets in celebration. Over that time, the ritual evolved, grew, and eventually transformed into what it is today. A full-blown powder, foam, and sometimes even mud fight that gets more chaotic as the day wears on. Some people join in lightly, a bit of a spray or a bit of a puff of powder here or there, but others fully commit to the battle, sprinting through the streets with talcum-filled bottles, foam cannons and water pistols, launching surprise attacks at anyone in range. And that's the rule of the day. Everyone is a fair target, and if you are outside, then you're part of the game. If you don't want to get covered in talcum powder, then it's pretty simple. You don't go out on that day. From our vantage point up above the square, we watched the mayhem unfold. The ground gradually disappeared beneath a pale, ghostly layer of white. But that blanket of powder actually made the parade even more striking. The elaborate floats and costumes seemed to glow against it. Each group represented something different: local communities, village associations, cultural collectives, businesses, causes, an airline, and all of it carried along by a soundtrack of booming drums, brass, and cheers that echoed through the mountains of Pasto.
Y para nuestros artesanos nariñenses, el artesano Almir Verace, que hace referencia a esta carroza. Y queridos sacerdotes, because it lasts like
I'm eternally grateful to Santiago and his friends for offering us that place and position that day on the rooftop. However, I hadn't come to Pasto simply to spectate. I knew that I wanted to get involved just a little bit at least. So I geared up, took a deep breath, and entered the fray. And this is what happened. After about 5 or 10 minutes, I made my way back up to the rooftop to give my lungs a chance to recover from inhaling all that talcum powder. I'm sure I'm going to regret that one day. But, you know, I don't regret it, because for a moment there, I wasn't just watching the festival, but I was part of it. With that done, we made our way back to the hotel, getting hit once or twice with talcum powder on the way, cleaned up, and then went out for dinner. We were walking to dinner when, out of nowhere, I got hit by a ball of talcum powder on the side of my head. And Santiago was worried that I would have been really bothered by that. But, I mean, you know, you go out in Pasto on a day like that, you know what's going to happen. And eventually we got to the restaurant for dinner, and I was far from the only person sitting in the restaurant looking like that. The next day we woke up and walked into the city center, where the cleanup from the Festival de Negros y Blancos was well underway. Now, there was still a little bit of foam and talcum powder being thrown around that day, but really not much. And the unofficial rule really does seem to be that, you know, once the festival is over, it is over. And people start going back to work, and there's almost nothing getting hurled around on the next day. One of Santiago's friends, Monica, who lives in a village near Pasto, came down to meet us in the center for the day, and she took us to the place where all of the floats from the previous day had been parked, waiting for storage later on. This gave us an opportunity to see the floats up close and really admire the detail and the craftsmanship that goes into making them. After that, we jumped into a car that Monica had organized, and we got driven towards Ipiales, a small town right on the border with Ecuador. But that wasn't our final destination. Just outside of there lies the stunning Santuario de Nuestra Señora de Rosario de Las Lajas. This is a shrine built dramatically into the side of a cliff, where it's believed that the figure of the Virgin Mary once appeared in the rock, a miracle that inspired the construction of the cathedral and shrine around it. Today, the modern architecture of the sanctuary is truly a sight to behold, rising majestically against the cliffside with the river gushing far below. You know what's crazy? Because this is one of those obscure things in Colombia that I had seen in a picture years ago and decided that I wanted to visit. And I remember telling a friend of mine, Gabriel, he's a very talented musician, by the way. You can follow him on Instagram. His handle's right there. I remember telling him about that probably 2 years ago, and time just flies because now I've been there, and it's pretty surreal to think about that. After that, Monica, Santiago and I made our way back to the center of Pasto, where we sat down at a cozy little bar tasting local snacks and trying local drinks. For example, blackberry juice mixed with aguardiente from the local region. Outside, the rain began to pour, which is not an uncommon occurrence in a mountainous, wet place like Pasto. And of course, it really helps to clean up after the festival, because at that point we could still see the main square was caked in talcum powder and flour. The next morning, Santiago had his flight back to Bogota, and Monica and I headed to the bus station from where I would depart Pasto. Monica gifted me some chocolates, which she emphasized were made with cacao from the local region, and I eventually boarded my bus and made my way out of Pasto. Santiago and Monica were so incredibly sweet while I was in Pasto, and I'm so glad that I got to experience Nariño with them. And I really hope that I get to see you both somewhere around this world again. I love you both. For me, this was the defining part of my time in Colombia. It was the kindness, the warmth, the generosity that was shown to me by ordinary Colombian people. Every time when I met people and then I had to say goodbye, or I was leaving a city, I felt like I was saying goodbye to family members that I had just adopted. And for me, this extraordinary hospitality, for me, that is Colombia. Make sure that you tune in again next time for Latin America Diaries, because it will be my last vlog from Colombia for this series. I will be experiencing that heartwarming Colombian hospitality again, and I will be wrapping up my time in this country telling you what I loved the most in Colombia. See you then.